Can you unmute?
Yep.
There you go. Great.
Hi.
Welcome. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. Hi. So for my contribution to Tides, I'm going to show two short films, and I'll just introduce them. So the first one that's going to be shown is a 2-minute film of a whirlpool, a tiny whirlpool on the River Thames in London by Richmond Lock. So I used to live quite near to Richmond Lock, in between there and Eel Pie Island, which was also a boat building boatyard. And I really loved watching the River Thames with all its tides and boats and ferries going backwards and forwards. There was always so much action. And I think it was Sally Sutton who shared some stuff around London, that tidal river. It's so powerful because it's such a huge tidal pull. And at the time I was working with an artist called Sheila Galani on a project called Common Salt. And she was living down in Rotherhithe and I was living up near Twickenham. And we often used to think of the River Thames as carrying ideas between us as we were thinking about our project. And our project took a long time. It was about empire and nature and trade and forgotten history. And we often thought of the river pulling it backwards and forwards. So I like this kind of idea that the seawater especially is like a kind of liquid idea. It gives you stimulus. It's salty and it has a lot to say to you. So I filmed this on my phone one evening on a high tide. It was a very high tide. It was over 4 meters at Richmond Lock on Tuesday, the 12th of April, 2016 at 7:15 in the evening. And it's about 50 meters or so below the Richmond Lock on the riverbank, just by the path. And I'd only seen this event once before. And I tried to film it properly, but I just happened to be there again when it did. And I never saw it again. I'd never seen it before and I never saw it again. And it was kind of at the moment where the River Thames, we used to get so high against the lock, it would spill out over into the brooks and the channels around either side of the River Thames and kind of flood up into the fields. And this is the whirlpool is being formed by the river being pulled right underneath down to these brooks. And often on the high tides, in spite of the roads, the signs along the roads and everything saying it was going to flood, loads of cars that were parked by the commuters, it would get flooded out. And once I saw one bobbing along by the slipway to Twickenham. So it's incredibly dynamic part of the river. Anyway, so here's the film of the small whirlpool pulling the River Thames out into the surrounding landscape. Okay, cool. Okay, so the second half of my little 10 minutes is going to be about the estuary of the River Avon, where it meets the sea in Bantham in South Devon. And I was really lucky to live, I rented a room for a winter in Bantham, and I swam a lot in the river. And I've been going there since I was about 18, and I've learned loads about the tides there. And in honor of this event, I'm going to put on this swimming cap, even though I never wear a swimming cap. I'm going to put the swimming cap on. Okay, so this is a swimming hat made by Conway and Young in Bristol. A special, beautiful artist swimming hat. And also, I'm just going to share these things, because basically I collect all these tide timetables for the South Devon coast, because I really love swimming at the high tides. And then I mark every tide that I've swum in. This one's for 2012. They kind of changed the format, which is a bit irritating, really. But it's really lovely. And these are sent to me by my friend Gretchen in South Devon. She knows I love the tide timetables. So I get kind of quite obsessed about swimming at high tide. And that tidal estuary is absolutely amazing, because you can really see it coming in and out. Like it's incredible tide. And once I did this meditation, I went on a silent retreat there, and we did this meditation at the side of the river, and we had to meditate through the high tide and watch as it went. And it was amazing, kind of, because I really thought I'd be able to see the tide change, and I kind of did, and I didn't. And it really made me think about that you see things, but then suddenly they've gone and you kind of haven't seen them. Like that thing that, like it was incredibly significant, but it's also kind of a bit inconsequential as well, because it's just coming and going. And the other thing I felt about living there was that sometimes I felt overwhelmed by the tides, and I really wanted it to stop, because it was really overwhelming watching it every day and feeling this kind of surge of water coming in. So the second film I'm going to play is a time lapse that I filmed from a camera from my room over the course of a tide going out and a tide coming in. So it's like a time lapse over about, I guess 12 hours, I think. Anyway, I think that's it.
Great, let's go to that film. Fantastic. That's great. You can really see why they call it a flood tide, can't you? Because it's in the whoosh, and then it's there. Lovely. That's fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Sue. We are going to move on to Kathy, if she is with us. Do we have Kathy? Is she there?
Oh, I can see her, but I can't hear.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Kathy, we can't hear you at the moment. We can't hear anything at the moment. Where'd the water go? Kathy, we can't hear anything. Perhaps you can't hear us. Ah, there we go. Oh, we nearly did.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Oh, sorry about that. I've got a lot of leads attached to me. I love a time lapse. Thanks, Sue. That was really lovely. And I really love the swimming hat. I'm going to get onto Conway and Young, see if I can get a swimming hat. So I'm definitely going to be in the River Avon swimming tomorrow. But I wanted to share with you at low tide here in Bristol, at the Avon Gorge, the wonderful mud. Look at the wonderful mud. Isn't it fantastic? So I'm at this point and I'm going to walk to a spot where you can see more mud, but I'm just going to see if we can listen to the mud with my hydrophone. I can't guarantee anything because sometimes you hear sounds in the mud and sometimes you don't. So here we go, in we go. Great. Let's have a listen. I think we can mainly hear the resonance of the roads and everything going on. So I'm going to come out of this mud and go and show you some glistening mud at this rather wonderful low tide. Live. Oh, look at that. That's nice. So I think, as well as being the highest tide of the year, I think we've got the lowest tide here in Bristol, which I think is 1 metre at the port of Avon. Can you still hear me all right? Can you see all right? Brunel's other bridge, that's a swing bridge made by Brunel that used to cross this lock. There's always something really nice when you get to the lock, when you've walked from the Cumberland Basin where everything's the same level all the time, and you can have a look and think, oh yeah, much lower. Right, I'm going to get a move on, so you've got to see this mud. Up. I needed to listen to the mud first, and the mud over here is just too far away for my hydrophone. So here it comes, the glistening mud with accompanying sirens. Wow! Look how low that is. So I feel like I'm just going to stay here showing you the mud until we want to move on. Unless anyone wants to say anything about the mud.
Okay, I think we're going to leave you there until the next time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for the glistening mud.
Bye for now.
Bye for now. So, Mary, I believe you are there. You are. Hi.
I am. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to pick up on the mud theme, but only in my little video that you're going to see in a moment. I'm based in Princeton, New Jersey, in the US, where I've been during the pandemic. My background is as a biologist and a publisher, formerly the publisher of Nature, the science journal, and before that, The Lancet, the medical journal. I've now returned to my early passion for art. And my main concern is environmental degradation, but especially climate change. The opportunity to translate and communicate visually in a variety of media about what is a major issue of our time is really what excites me. And science underpins my art, fairly obviously, I suppose. I'm keenly interested in interdisciplinary collaboration, such as this wonderful high watermark program. So with no more ado, I'm going to ask for the little video that I've prepared, which is really about tidal wetlands in New Jersey that are very threatened by high water. Thank you. I'm going to touch on aspects of high water in science and art through considering one area of tidal wetlands in New Jersey that has inspired my work. This is on the eastern seaboard of the US. A number of barrier islands fringe coastal expanses of the East Coast, and these shelter land margin behind them from the full force of the Atlantic. The tidal range is much less than in the UK. The Edwin B. Forsyth Wildlife Refuge is more than 47,000 acres of southern New Jersey coastal wetlands, much of which is very shallow, less than 9 inches deep at mean water level. It was established in 1939 as a refuge to protect tidal wetland and shallow bay habitat. New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the US, and this puts pressure on wetlands for drainage and development. Much of the renewed interest in wetlands comes from the unique ability of these habitats to help mitigate human-caused environmental degradation because of their structure and because of their position between land and water. The primary factor that distinguishes wetlands from other landforms or water bodies is the characteristic vegetation of aquatic plants, adapted to the unique waterlogged soils that are often flooded and so lack oxygen. Why are wetlands important in helping to mitigate environmental degradation? Well, they purify water by removing and utilising nitrates and phosphates and breaking down pesticides from agricultural runoff as the water slowly flows from the land through wetland to the open water. Wetlands are important in flood control because they absorb water after rain like a sponge and slowly release it into the aquifer. Wetlands also work as a carbon sink. Carbon is stored in living vegetation, as well as the peats and sediments built up over thousands of years. Really, this is carbon sequestration. Wetlands are also important in shoreline stability, as the plants that grow along the shorelines and banks act as a buffer zone, strengthening structure and the integrity of the shore, and providing stability by combining soils with their roots. Wetlands are some of the most biodiverse areas of the world, home to many endangered animal species. These are just 3 examples of endangered species of wetlands, rendered as drawings on rice paper. A whooping crane, horseshoe crab, and the recently adopted New Jersey state reptile, the 4-inch bog turtle. And when you look down in wetlands, you often see that it's literally teeming with life, as here. Wetlands, however, have not been top of the list for preservation. Humans often mistreat natural habitats, such as wetlands, that is less hospitable or less obviously useful to them, irrespective of the environmental value of wetlands and the many other species that occupy it. The graph here indicates a roughly 6-inch rise in sea level at the Forsyth Refuge over 20 years. We know this is increasing even more rapidly. New Jersey is experiencing rising sea levels, especially noticeable at the time of king tides, such as today. King tides, extremely high tides, are a good indicator of what future tide levels will be due to the climate crisis. The number of cumulative flood days along the New Jersey shore is increasing. In addition, the East Coast is sinking because of post-glacial geological forces and removal of groundwater by humans. Add in fiercer still hurricanes that roar up the coast from the Caribbean in the autumn, and storm surge has a larger still impact. When sea level rises faster than marsh accretion, tidal marshes such as those in New Jersey are drowned and replaced by mud, sand flats, or just open water. Turning to my art inspired by this refuge, my art practice as an eco-artist is rooted in work on site, collecting visual information, observing and taking photos and video and sketching. Quite literally, my studio is the outdoors. Much of my thinking takes place here. Often I go out simply to see what happens, what I catch sight of, even from the corner of my eye, and how particular places make me feel. I used a multi-panel format for these 5 paintings to try and capture the sweeping views across the marsh at the Edwin B. Forsyth Wildlife Refuge. This is not a realistic panoramic view, rather selected elements I saw with the strong horizontal line of the marsh plants. Within 20 years, when the mean sea level rises a further 6 inches or more, this area will be inundated with seawater. All the existing plant life will be gone, as will the trees. Obviously, there's always mud in wetlands, and I noticed that the textures, colours and forms vary according to particular local conditions. So I collected mud from the different wetlands I went to. Each wetland site has a unique profile with different organic and inorganic components, simply because of local differences in minerals in the soils, what's filtered through them, what the plant population is like, and so forth. So I made mud drawings using mud from these different wetland sites on watercolour paper. You can see the wide variety of textures and colours. These mud drawings provide strong, alternative portraits of place, using natural materials rather than paint. The observations of mud for this series made me think about wetlands landscape and how to convey the essence of that complex, intricate ecosystem, how to capture the feelings, colours and textures of a place without an attempt at a direct or photographic representation. In sum, I wanted to explore abstraction of this landscape. The natural environment is filled with abstract patterns, the ripples in water, waves, rocks, foliage, and tree branches, and for some viewers, abstraction in art is more engaging, more immersive, often relying on personal experience and imagination, precisely because the image is not explicitly tied to time and place. Abstraction places more emphasis on aesthetics, such as colour, texture, or shape, and every artist has his or her own particular approach. For wetlands, I was personally influenced by the slow flow of water I had observed. Slow flow, seen here, is a series of paintings shown on a light box and rotating in a window. Delicate watercolours, layered over each other, suggest the gentle movement of water through coastal wetland habitats as rains and tides move through. In addition, wetlands have a wide range of changing colours through the seasons and shifts in texture from soggy wet to parched dry. For a series of larger paintings, I started each piece by incorporating various artist media to create rich surface textures and let it dry. Then I poured diluted paint with water onto the canvas, layers and layers and layers of it. I tilted the canvas to produce a slow flow of paint with water mimicking the flow of water through wetlands. And I learned to leave the paint alone and see what happens. Leaving the paint alone was often the hardest part. My work on tidal wetlands celebrates the unique beauty of wetlands and invites you, the audience, closer to look afresh at the fragile, now more often inundated, tidal wetlands. Wetlands, in their humble way, are such a valuable contributor to our well-being, but high water levels increasingly threaten their integrity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. There's lots of comments in the chat about the work. One question I'd like to ask you, I think, is that shift from the world of the Lancet and nature to working with
Mud.
work that is free and very abstract seems like living in a different universe.
It is. And I was very fortunate. I decided I would go ahead and do an undergraduate degree once I had finished my formal work, and I've just completed that. And I did it online. So that was a huge boost. It pushed me really into contemporary art in a way that I would not have done if I'd just sort of done bits of classes here and there. So I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to start another career with eco art and to have that scientific underpinning, which brings it all to life, really. But thank you for pointing that out. It is very different.
Yes. We have a few minutes. We can either ask a question specifically for Mary, or we can just.
I might explain what a refuge means in the
yes,
US.
do. Yeah.
It's used to. There was an act passed, a very powerful act passed by Congress, which stated that the refuge was where humans were not dominant. The dominant thing were the plants and animals that were living there. And there are relatively few real refuges. Of course, most of them are out in the West, American West, but there are relatively few of them. So this particular one is unusual and special. And when you go there, you really do feel that you're visiting somewhere that you will clearly go away from. There's no sign of habitation. It's wonderful.
Mm. So how is that balanced with the ability to actually go and visit?
It's very well curated, and they've got a drive round, so people can drive all the way out into this enormous area. It's a big birders place because it's the Atlantic Skyway where the migrating birds come down. So there's always lots of people with binoculars looking up, and I was always looking down at the mud. So
mud has definitely been a feature today.
it is, isn't it? I like that.
I feel like we're sloshing around in the mud quite a bit, which is which is nice.
Just the way.
So much.
But thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That was wonderful.
Great opportunity to share it with you. Thank you.
Would anyone like to tell us a bit more about a muddy experience or a sandy experience?
Ian, you're talking about mud, Baltic mud.
Oh, Ian.
Yeah.
We can't hear you. You're not muted, aren't you?
Am I?
No, you're not.
Is that it unmuted now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Grand. Yeah, no, I'm very, very struck by the work and the progression from the science to the discussion on abstraction, but it brought to mind Mikko Pakala, Finland. I curated an exhibition in Atlanta Stornoway and invited Mikko to take part. And what he did was he threw some mirror plates off a pier in the Baltic with PVA adhering and used the mud that stuck to it as a painting medium. And visually, there was quite a correspondence with what we've just seen. But it was also a kind of analogy to Baltic traders coming to the Hebrides in ballast for herring, and of course, leaving the ballast behind. So there's still parts of Stornoway Harbour which are known as Little Russia because of this exchange of mud and ballast. Yeah. Just a little digression on mud.
Great side, yes, a great side.
I'll just say that Richard Long, obviously one of the key landscape artist types, did a series of works using mud from the Avon in Bristol in the Spike Island Gallery.
And they're in the Tate, I think.
Okay, yeah.
They're all hung up. They're all the same mud. And I found that each place has slightly different mud, and it looks different. The colour's different, everything, and it's remarkable. I mean, it's sort of obvious, but it's remarkable.
May I say, sorry, Richard, could I just say something about Severn mud, seeing we're talking about Richard Long?
Yeah, do. Please,
yeah. So I live near the Severn, I'll be talking soon, but I'm really into the mud at the moment. It's not just the river and the tides, etc. It's actually the mud. I'm fascinated. There's a place called Garden Cliff. It's Triassic rocks, and it's called grey and red mud. So I'm making jelly prints and all sorts of things. I'm trying to make my own pigment with it as well, which is getting a bit very, very expensive for a very small amount of medium, but I'm getting there. Just wanted to back that up.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Good. Well, we look forward to hearing more, Carolyn, when you join us later. Pete, are you ready to go? I think you're there.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, great. You want to?
Do I have to have permission to do a share?
You do. You're in the elevated position of having full permission.
Okay, let me screen share. Right. Oops. I'm taking, it's quite an interesting way of actually coming into this now, because I'm taking a slightly different perspective, but I so much appreciate the kind of question of materiality here. So the understanding that I'm going to be showing this afternoon is something that that's very live at the moment. I'm actually been trying to desperately render some of these images out this morning and have failed miserably. So you'll be getting a kind of series of stills, but thank you so much for kind of inviting me to talk. My name is Pete Quinn-Davis. I'm a creative producer working with analog and digital technologies. In the intersection, I expect, between art and design. I've been using scanning data for about 8 years, mostly lens-based. And I started by using static contested heritage objects as a kind of source of inspiration. But for the last year, I've been using LiDAR scanning, that's laser, using machine vision to record billions and billions of precisely measured points to observe change in spatial and temporal scales. Invisible to us, but these in turn can be explored from any moment in time at extreme detail, from a rock face to a tidal range to a grain of sand. It's quite remarkable. But as we kind of all know, from handheld devices that fit in your pocket to the large-scale digital infrastructures that keeps our shelves stocked and cars driving, digital technologies underpin almost everything we do in modern society. And I suppose with that power comes great potential to use these to tackle one of the biggest issues facing the world, which is climate change. So it's using LiDAR scanning as a way of tracing change and using LiDAR scanning as a way of tracing temporal shift. So machine learning obviously can facilitate cleaner and greener journeys and does by analyzing traffic data, lower congestion, all the stuff we kind of know about reducing emissions in real time. Combining digital sensors with wireless networks and computer analysis can also help farmers shift to smarter ways of farming, where food production is optimized and waste minimized. And these are just two examples from a list of nearly endless applications. But this being said, we're here to celebrate and to observe not only mud, which there's been a lot of chat about, connect and immerse ourselves in the tide, the sea, the boundary, the liminality between the liquid and the solid. So I've kind of recently been focusing the scanner on various natural phenomena, trees, landscapes, and particularly estuaries, both from an artistic, creative perspective, but also from a kind of digital cartographer or geographer. And I have to say, kind of for me personally, the results have been technically kind of remarkable, but really, really difficult. They're quite extraordinary looking things. But I like to kind of describe them as they're creative, they're scientific, and they're a bit like looking at geography at a rave festival. But these particular series of images come from Whitsand Bay, situated in the southwest Cornwall in England, the United Kingdom. And it runs from Rainhead in the east to Porthwinkle in the west. It is characterized by sheer high cliffs, dramatic scenery, long stretches of sandy beaches, and the southwest coast path runs at the top and length of the bay. They're the only images as moving sequence, so I put these in as stills because I couldn't render the moving sequences, and they really don't transfer quite well to Zoom world anyway. But in a kind of wider sense, this is what I'm going to be kind of showing you. This is a LiDAR scan of a surface, and if you consider them as a series of skins, so this is the laser working through 180 degrees at extreme detail at a rock surface where the sea has just left through the tide. And I think one of these things is, if you see these as different types of skin, so the laser, what actually happens to the laser is that it elevates and layers these skins many, many, many times. So it's kind of continuously moving back and forward, observing the run, while actually you can move the laser around. And if you're using more than one laser, you can get wider circles and more details. But the story of change is, and its effect is often one received with kind of reluctance, yet we and our coastlines are surrounded by change. It's just that its pace is outside sometimes our perception. And with climate change, these changes look set to be accelerated and become more unpredictable. utilizing cutting-edge technology and immersive media could create a platform to discussion for this change. So not only are we observing this as a LiDAR scan through 180 degrees, but we're also creating an immersive environment where we can actually re-enter the space and observe it from many, many different angles, different layers, from the footprints of our feet in the sand to the rocks on the shore. When you're using scanners, it's obviously very technical, but it also can be very, very beautiful. And for this project, which is, I suppose, kind of creatively driven, it's a deep process with scientific and practical purpose. And it is the way the processing side is done, which is kind of fraught with problems. It's really, really slow and clunky. But if you consider that this is as an exciting early photography, it's pretty exciting to be involved in it, because in a way it is not lens-based, as I said, it's a series of lasers. And if you think, just like early photography, that you could apply this at a frame rate, in other words, you could do a scan every minute across our many coastlines and estuaries, we would really see, if we stitched all those together, the most amazing kind of temporal shifts in real time. This is only an initial push into this space, and the goal is to promote discussion about changes to our natural environments and discuss them from many of the complex perspectives, provoking questions around loss of ecology, changes in coastline, obviously flooding, and the impacts of the proposed developments. But I'm hoping that the ideas designed and created in consultation with stakeholders of a much larger scheme, with whom the results could provide valuable insights into changes within their respective fields. And these currently include the British Geological Survey, obviously the University of Plymouth, where I'm program lead for MA Design, the Marine Environments Lab, and the Met Office in the UK. And I think the recorded data sets will be made available as a scientific resource, the initial capture location being guided by areas of interest to ongoing research fields. And the goal is that this creatively driven process of collaboration will put much more public engagement of science kind of first, creating an engaging immersive experience for learning and discussion, maybe prompting the establishment of value in the green economy in times of renewal. But one thing I have been thinking about is how using this rather separating technology. So in a way, what we experience when we're out in the environment is a oneness with the environment, because we feel it viscerally. We have it on our body. We can feel the wind. We can see the sea. We can feel the sea. And the interesting thing for me here is that this, in a way, separates us from that experience. That, for me, creatively, is a very interesting space to be, because it kind of reaches out to a understanding of the materialization of data. So data could be seen as a material itself, a little bit like we see objects or microplastics. But I think for me, it's seeking to start a discussion how this digital data affects people, spaces, environments, and becomes maybe a force for change. How can data maybe enable the creation and delivery of a new experience? Where can maybe organizational, environmental, and technological data drive inclusivity, more connection, and facilitate environmental and technological change?
Peter, I think we've got 1 minute left, sorry.
Okay. The intention of the work is to bring an awareness and understanding of the human and social values that must underpin the development of new technologies for capture and the analysis of data, while delivering more knowable ethical experiences, and particularly focused on how our coastlines are changing and adapting to the tides and climate. And this is a lovely quote, I love this, from Lisa Blackman about haunted data. And if you kind of look at these images, they do look rather spectral and haunted. But that's me. Thank you very much.
Pete, thank you. I think, you know, the description of the work, those images as haunted, is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because they are, there's something quite extraordinary about them. I'm curious about the circles that we see. Is that an artifact, or is that something specific that we're looking at?
That's really interesting. You mentioned that. That's actually where the laser cannot see.
Right.
So if you imagine the tripod and the laser whizzing around like that, actually that's where it cannot see below. So those circles become kind of non-places. They're quite bizarre.
Yeah.
But nonetheless really interesting, because if you have two lasers kind of working from different parts of the coastline, you don't actually get those because it kind of fills in those gaps. But I actually really love those voids. They're kind of almost you feel like you could fall into them.
Yes, exactly. No, they are. They're very black hole like, actually. They're very, very interesting from that perspective. I think sadly we need to move on. But thank you very much indeed for sharing. That was a really nice, kind of interesting, different perspective on what we see and what we don't see in the world. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.